Okay, you lot. So today we will be beginning our probably long-awaited series, right? And in these ones, I will essentially be reviewing all units in the game, right? Today I'm gonna start with possibly one of the most popular units in the game, and that is gonna be, where is it? ARTNIS, right? So yeah, each video I do in this series, right, I will essentially talk a bit about the unit, their skill kit, where they work best, right, and then cover a lot of aspects. First of all, I usually start with PvP, right, like not too in-depth when going to PvP, but just basically what sort of like usually what users they have there. Mostly I'm gonna go in depth on PvE unless the unit is like specifically PvP focused, such as like Libertas, for example, right? But since ARTNIS is a bit more PvE focused, I'm gonna expand a lot on the PvE aspect. So I'm gonna be talking, just to name a few things, basically what sort of build, equipment, stats that you should go for, the skill up priorities if you do encounter to get a dupe or two, right? What sort of Remementos work best on them, and yeah, just sort of like team combinations that you can think of. Just a brief overview from my perspective of using each unit, right? Okay, and because ARTNIS is mainly used for PvE content, right, I'm gonna quickly glance over some PvP use that you may think of her, right? And because of her passive and because of her ultimate actually doing a relatively decent amount of damage and a lot of dots, she can work in some PvP content. Definitely not as like a main damage dealer, but she can be sort of this like secondary sub DPS unit that contributes a bit towards attack bar manipulation, right? Because the current meta is very focused around Libertas, right? And with Libertas push, you can add like a little secondary push with ARTNIS. Nothing too crazy, right? But it can help you out a bit. And for example, for the 4th spot, you can go for like a DPS or something like that, right? However, with PvP, here's the thing with ARTNIS, right? If you are using her as a big source of damage, she can get countered quite easily, right? Any heal will usually outlast the dots quite easily. Any cleanse will absolutely delete her. If you do manage to encounter Beatrice on defense, right, she is like a perfect counter to ARTNIS, and if you land a few dots on a team that has Beatrice, that Beatrice is pretty much gonna one-shot you when her turn comes. So yeah, a little bit situational, right, but you can definitely still use her as sort of like a secondary DPS in your team. But now let's talk about PvE when it comes to ARTNIS, right? Because that is where she really excels at, right? So first of all, I'm gonna start a bit with the skill ups, right? And if you do have dupes, which sort of skills you should be prioritizing? As you can see, yesterday I did manage to pull my 4th dupe, so now all of my skills are maxed out. The only thing that's missing is the stats themselves, right? But yeah, with the first dupe, if you do get the first dupe, there are two options, right? You can either go for the 2nd skill or the 3rd skill. In my opinion and in my experience of using her, I would highly recommend going for the 2nd skill up first. The reason for that is, as you can see, with skill ups, they will increase the chance by 30%, right? So the gain you actually get is equal, right? But the thing is, ultimate, it does have a 3-turn cooldown, which means that you will be using this skill, and for like the next 2-3 turns, assuming that you have enough mana, you will be using the 2nd skill on her, and overall you will be landing a lot more 2nd skills, and with the increase being identical, you will simply have way more value from using the 2nd skill, right? In some situations, you will also see that sometimes you don't have enough mana, and you may even choose to use the 2nd skill over the 3rd skill, right? But this is concerning a bit more like high level PvE content, where you really have to like squeeze into a certain amount of turns, right? So yeah, for skill ups, I would highly recommend going for the 2nd skill first. After that, if you get a 2nd dupe, of course, go for the ultimate. 3rd dupe should be going to the passive, and the last dupe, if you do manage to pull it, will go to the 1st skill. Now for equipment, the one thing you will see on my account, right, is that a lot of the units will usually have speed equipment plus either HP or defense offsets, right? And this does not mean that this is like the perfect setup. This means that I simply do not farm the Nazca dungeon at all, right? I only farm the Charlotte dungeon. I have been farming only the Charlotte dungeon for the months that I've been playing, so you will not see the actual usually best gear on that unit, right? I mostly just focus on PvP, so I do want to farm speed all the time. But for the sets themselves, the ideal sets that you can use on her, at least the 3 main ones, will be one option being the speed set, second option being the attack set, and the third option being the effect accuracy set. Let me even see if I have one, because I might not. Yeah, you know what? I don't even have the effect accuracy. But yeah, the reason for that is this unit, essentially, to make use of like 98% of her potential, you will need 3 stats. You will need high speed, so that she's able to cycle a lot of dots, and because of reducing attack gauge, the more speed you have, the less the enemy will actually move as well. Second thing, you want effect hit. That should be usually the second priority, because here's the deal: if you don't land the dots, you won't be doing damage, right? Like the third priority is attack, right? And that's because dots directly scale with attack. But again, if you don't actually land the dots, there won't be a chance for them to even scale, right? And you may be wondering why I'm saying that dots scale with attack, especially if you look at the tooltip here. This is actually a bad translation. I'm not sure whether this is intentional, whether this is like AI made, but yeah, this is not how dots work, right? This is only part of the equation, right? The way dots actually work is they will do either 5% of the enemy's max HP for each dot, or they will do damage equal to 100% of your attack, whichever one is lower. Now, what do I mean by that is essentially, let's imagine that an enemy, like let's say a boss, has 10,000 HP, right? One dot, as you can see, 5% of 10,000 would be 500 damage. And my ARTNIS currently has 1,239 attack. So because the 500 is a lower amount, each dot will do exactly 500 damage on that boss, right? Now let's imagine that the boss has 10 times more HP. It has 100,000, right? Which is usually closer to reality. In that case, 5% of his HP would be 5,000, and ARTNIS has 1,239 damage. In that case, ARTNIS and her dots will be doing exactly 1,239 damage per dot, right? You can test it out on a lot of difficult bosses. You'll see that your dot damage, both with ARTNIS and with this Jeremiah, will be equal to your attack, right? This is a very bad translation. I'm hoping they do fix it. If you want to see the correct translation, feel free to switch to the Korean language. You will see that the attack part is also added in there. But yeah, that's just how the dot works, just so to clear up some confusion. Now, for the Remementos that work best for them, out of the ones that exist for debuffer units, I've picked 3, right? I myself am using this one, right? It's currently only at level 1, but essentially it increases your effect hit rate by 10%. Effect hit rate, for those who are not familiar, is the chance to land a debuff, right? So you do need effect hit rate either from your stats or a little bit from your Rememento, and 25% chance to land an increased damage taken debuff on an enemy. The cool thing about this is you can land this even if you don't use a skill, right? You can just use a basic attack and it still has the same chance to land. I found this to be a very useful one, but it's definitely not the only option, right? But yeah, this one works really well. Another option that you have is her signature Rememento, of course. Increases accuracy by 10. By the way, I'm looking at level 1, right? You can check maximum level if you want here as well. Usually it's going to be double the amount. But yeah, increases effect hit accuracy as well. And enemy attacks have a 37% chance to land 1 dot for 1 turn. Right now, this one overall, I mean, on a daughter, it's a good skill, right? But then again, it only activates when the enemy moves. It only gives 1 dot, and usually, like, let's say if the speeds are equal, right, and for every 1 enemy turn, ARTNIS moves once as well, if we calculate the total dot damage from her second skill, she lands 3 dots for 2 turns each, right? Let's say like average 2 dots of 2 turns each, because it's only 70% chance, right? In that case, she is on average landing 4 dots worth of damage. With her ultimate, she has 100% 3 turn duration and 3 dots. That's a total of 9 dots worth of damage, right? So the not even 100% chance to land 1 dot really doesn't feel like that amazing. It's a nice damage chip bonus. I would say it maybe will contribute to like 5 to 10% of her total damage from dots, but overall nothing too crazy, right? And in a lot of cases, if you do have an additional DPS, this will be the memento that will actually work a bit better for her, right? And the last option you have is the Libertas artifact. This one, again, is mostly just for a little bit of additional damage, but I would say this one is probably like the 3rd best for her, right? So in my opinion, I would highly recommend this one if you are able to get it. I believe this is a Battle Pass one, so you can get it either from Pity or from the Battle Pass shop. The second best one will probably be her signature Rememento, and then the Libertas Rememento is a very decent option as well, right? Now, when you're building teams, right, I'm not gonna give like a specific team for a specific dungeon, anything like that. I did make a few videos on team building previously, right, specifically one tomorrow if you are interested in the equipment dungeons. But yeah, I'm just gonna more talk about what sort of like combos they work well with, right? And for ARTNIS, as you know, because her dots for the most part against like difficult content skills with her attack, the natural combo for her will be to have an attack buffer at all times. There are 3 options for that. So Stein is one of them. That's usually the combo I use with her because again, for example, Pluto is a good option, right? Because she also buffs attack buff. Here's the deal, she also buffs critical rate, which usually doesn't really do much for ARTNIS, right? Dots are not boosted by critical rate, critical damage at all. So that's a bit of a lost stat. Pluto I usually use with more like direct DPS units, and Stein I use a bit more with dot damage units, right? But yeah, Pluto is another option, of course, and the 3rd attack buffer in the game is Enos. Again, she gives lifesteal on the 3rd skill, which again on ARTNIS it doesn't work with dots, so it doesn't contribute as much, but it is also an option if you do manage to skill up her ultimate ability and you don't have any other attack buffer available, right? Although one thing I want to mention with all of these attack buffers, right, usually their attack buffs for all 3 of them are gonna last 3 turns once upgraded. But here's the deal, right, you don't want to make ARTNIS too fast to a point where she loses the attack buff, right? Because when the boss moves, right, your goal is to make sure that she permanently has an attack buff, right? Because that directly increases the dot damage by a lot. You want to make sure that she moves fast where she can stack a lot of dots, but you don't want her moving too fast to a point where your support units are not able to upkeep the attack buff on her, right? For example, in this case, I currently have my Stein at around 250 speed, I have my ARTNIS at around 200 speed. This is a point where Stein is barely able to keep up with a permanent attack buff on ARTNIS by also cycling her 2nd skill on herself, right? So this means every time Stein moves, she gives 50% attack H to herself, and even then she barely manages to make sure that ARTNIS is able to upkeep the attack buff. So for options like Enos and Pluto, they will require even more speed because they don't have that built-in cycling, or your ARTNIS will have to be a little bit slower because trust me, when the boss takes damage and your ARTNIS doesn't have the attack buff on her, the dots lose a lot of value. Just to confirm it, I believe attack buff is 50%, yeah. So you can imagine that your dots are essentially gonna do 50% less damage than if they had a attack buff active, right? And another very popular unit to combo her with will be Jeremiah, right? So first of all, her 1st and 2nd skills also have a dot, right? The dot works the same on her as well, scales with her attack, right? So it's a really good option when you're countering bosses where you want to stack a lot of dots, right? With her third skill, she's also able to burn the dots, which means that she will do damage. Essentially, she will consume all of the dots, and she will do damage equal to how much those dots would have done, right? Again, I'm not sure whether this is the correct translation, because here's the deal. Yesterday, I tested this specifically, right? And what it does is essentially it does half of the damage. What I mean by that is, let's say with ARTNIS, right? I've landed... let's say I missed and I only landed 1 dot for 2 turns, right? As you know, based on her attack, 1 dot will do 1239 damage. It lasts for 2 turns, so in total it will do around 2.5k damage if you just let the dot tick, right? For 2 turns. The thing with burn is if you explode it with this, and the boss currently has 1 dot for 2 turns, right? It will only do half of the total damage, and essentially it will consume the 2-turn dot, but it will only do a total of 1239 damage, right? And if the dot only has 1 turn duration left, right, it will only do half of the damage. So essentially, if there's only 1 dot and it only lasts for 1 turn, it will only do half of her attack if you do explode it. So usually it's best to leave the dots to tick for themselves and only use the explosion skill when you are very, very close to killing the boss and you are confident that half of the total dot amount will be enough to kill, right? And yeah, that's pretty much my review of ARTNIS, right? Amazing unit. You will use her in pretty much all PvE content that isn't water, right? Because naturally, she does need to land the dots, and she will have a lot of trouble landing them on water enemies. Of course, I've still used them in some water-based content, but overall, there are definitely better options if you are fighting water enemies, right? But yeah, ARTNIS overall, very, very good unit, relatively easy to build because she doesn't require stuff like crit rate, crit damage, all of that, right? So she will be less stat hungry overall compared to a lot of DPS. And yeah, hope you enjoyed. If you do have any questions regarding ARTNIS, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And yeah, hope you enjoyed, and peace.